All right, welcome everybody back to the Big Douglas Show. This is the latest edition of Inside the Command Center, where we try to get you as close to the organization as we can. Today, from the Athletic, we invited Ben Standig on. Ben, how you doing, buddy?
Doug, I'm well. Thanks for having me. Hope your good holiday season to you and yours and stuff.
Yeah, it's that time. It's getting all ramped up. Ben, I'm curious, now that you guys are allowed back into the locker room, is there a certain player that stands out to you that is more enjoyable to interview? You know, some guys are very straight laced and don't give much. Some guys are characters. Who are those guys that you look forward to get a little interview time with?
Well, I mean, Terry McLaurin is always very good. He gives really great quotes, whether it's about himself or the offense or just to some of his teammates. So he's always a really good one. I think like there's two different versions of people for in the locker room. There's the, hey, can I ask you a few questions? And sometimes even guys who are playful and fun can get buttoned up a little bit because, their words are about to be public or whatever it is. But in terms of just like hanging around, like the defensive line group, not so much Allen and Payne per se, but like James Smith Williams is a guy that banters with us a lot. I talked to him on my podcast this week because he had a charitable endeavor going on, and we discussed like why he kind of messes with us a little bit. Taylor Heinecke's really good. Chase Young, when we're not like on the record, is fun to BS with. And then like the guys in the secondary, they are generally not so much with us, but they're generally pretty animated over there. So it's a pretty good locker room. Even when they were down, they didn't seem to be particularly distraught or anything. And you never know for sure about chemistry because we don't see everything. But in general, I do buy the notion that they all kind of get along.
And who's the funniest on the beat?
Oh boy, the funniest on the beat. I mean, everybody's got their moments. I mean, we kind of joke that like if you were like keeping stats on like how often somebody is like cranking up a shot or or in this case making a joke, like Matt Paris is definitely the highest volume shooter in the group. But he's got like he's sort of like Carson Wentz. So it's like sometimes you're like, wow, what a great throw, and other times you're like, I don't know. I'll go with Matt.
I'm sure Paris will be glad to be the Carson Wentz of the beat.
Well, I just mean he's. I
know, just messing with you.
I'm not even knocking Carson Wentz. I'm just saying the style of play.
I got you. Let's get to some of this injury report stuff. What is the prognosis on St. Just? Is it a mid ankle that he's got going on? I guess he was at practice today. What do you know what the plan is for him?
Well, he's out this week. He was at practice, but only on the side field. It's a mid to high ankle sprain. So I don't know the difference between that in the sense of like if we're saying it's a high ankle sprain, the guy's going to be out a few weeks. This will obviously be the second game in a row he's missed, and then the bye week. So I mean, I asked Rivera about it today, but he didn't give us too much of a definitive answer. So I mean, look, if they obviously need to win this game, but with the bye week there, I mean, I'm guessing he wasn't that close to playing, but with the bye week there, it gives you the opportunity to say, all right, let's give this another week here to heal in this case, and then you get the bye week, and then hopefully he can be ready to go when they play the Giants again.
And fortunately, at least, I mean, the Giants don't have like a plethora of receivers they're running out there. So if ever there was a week to be missing a corner, it feels like this is the one to be missing.
Yeah, it's so funny, right? Last year, the schedule was one Pro Bowl level quarterback after another. And this year, and we knew this coming in, that's why they had one of the easier projected schedules. But the last 3 weeks, right? Davis Mills, Marcus Mariota, and now it'll be Daniel Jones this week, and then presumably Daniel Jones in 2 weeks. Yeah, that if you're going to be down in the secondary, this is a good time to do it. So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of wild that you go back to the beginning of the year. I know William Jackson didn't work out, but like to not have William Jackson or St. Just, I think would look like a huge question mark. back then, and I'm not saying it's not now, but for the moment, the opponents don't seem to make it as big of a deal as it could be.
Wes Schweitzer still has a concussion.
He's been cleared.
Okay.
He's back practicing, but he's not fully back off of IR yet. He's on that 21-day window cycle. So, again, we'll probably get a better feel about if he's able to go after the bye. But the fact that he's able to, get back out there is a good sign. He's been away for a while, and you just never know how these things go with concussions. But at least it's a good sign that he's back practicing, and maybe they can get him back after the bye.
When did they open up the window on him? I guess I had missed that.
I think it was this week.
Yeah. Okay.
My memory is terrible, but I think it was this week.
Holcomb done for the year. He's up for a contract too, right? Like, how do you think this affects him? And then how far up the list or how important do you think he is for re-signing to the team?
Yeah, I don't know if he's out for the year yet, but he's on IR, so he's going to miss at least. What is this? I've lost track. I think this is the second game he'll miss since he's been on IR. So he'd have a couple more. Obviously it's not great timing for him. I mean, look, I think Cole Holcomb's a pretty solid player. He's obviously the guy that they have calling the signals and things like that. So they obviously have put a lot of stock in him. At the same point, it's not, he's not like some world beater or anything, but like, look, if they bring him back, I don't think that anybody would really have an issue with that. You can't have Pro Bowlers at every level or at every play, every spot. And he's a good player. And as we kind of know, other than Jamin Davis, they don't really have anybody that you're particularly excited about. And, Jamin Davis has been better for sure this year, but, still kind of figuring it out. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, if he doesn't come back or if he comes back in just a limited way, does that give Washington sort of the edge in the negotiation?
Because I looked, it's like $5 to $7 million for like a mid to upper level linebacker, I guess.
Yeah, it could be. They are, as we know, look, every team has interesting decisions in the offseason when it comes to who to keep and salary cap and all that kind of stuff. And Washington with the quarterback variable, you don't know for sure. Are they spending $25 million a year on a quarterback, or are they drafting a rookie and spending, $5? That's a huge question. And then the answer to that question leads to, can you afford to keep Daron Payne? Can you afford to keep Cole Holcomb at a number that makes everybody happy? So I think it's important, but at the same point, if they get another linebacker somewhere else, maybe they can get by. But I think it's important to keep him. But that's, again, based on there's no like, at least like hypothetically in the case of they move on from Payne, they have, they drafted Fedarian Mathis. Ridgeway looks interesting. I don't know what they would do at linebacker. They would have to go get somebody who doesn't currently live here.
It's interesting, Ben, because the first week Holcomb's out, I think Curl wears the green dot. And then since Jamin Davis has been wearing the green dot, but not really playing middle linebacker. Were you surprised they made the switch? Because I had always thought that they thought, at least with Davis, part of the problem was his processing. So I was surprised that they thought maybe that way was slow him down a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good sign for sure. I think in that first game, he wasn't, I'm blanking on who the opponent was, but he wasn't out there like 100% of the snaps. That was a game where they really were trying to, go even more DB heavy than normal. But since then, he's been out there pretty much every snap. And I think that's just a huge difference. But yeah, it also does speak to his development that they were willing to, give him that responsibility. And, as far as we can tell, it looks like it's gone pretty well. And, I think if assuming the pace continues that they're at, I think when we look back at the season, Jamin Davis' development is going to be one of the more positive stories. It's not to say he's, a Pro Bowl player yet or whatever, but, after last year,
the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. After last year, it was like, oh boy, where is this going? And now it's been like, okay, good player. And now we'll see how high he can take it.
What is the Milne injury?
Foot. He was out there on the side field today too.
Are you surprised they're not using Dotson as the returner in his absence?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
it's not to say that the returner isn't important, but they need Dotson to focus on what he's doing. I mean, it wouldn't stun me if, say, hypothetically, just to use this game, it's like, let's just say it's the fourth quarter and they got to get a scoring drive. Maybe you go for a little more upside with a guy like him than the safer play with presumably Alex Erickson. I could see something like that. I don't want to compare Dotson to Darrell Green, but like the way it was, they did back in the day. So there is that. But I think in general, look, I think in Gibson's case, he's returning kicks because they did lessen his role once Brian Robinson became a thing, and this was a way to use him more. But I think in Dotson's case, like, even though he's getting less targets because of the whole run game situation and all that, but like, I think he's still got a pretty good role, and he's not the biggest guy out there, so I'm not surprised, I guess, that they're not using him there.
The numbers for Dotson are down, and you mentioned the run game that obviously, and Terry's getting a large percentage of the throws. But I also wonder with Dotson, like, he was one of those guys that was open, and Carson Wentz knew he'd be open and would throw it to him early. Like, that was part of those touchdowns early on. And I don't think Heinecke does it that way, right? He sees it and then throws rather than being anticipatory. Do you think that has lessened what Dotson's been able to do, or is it you think it's more just about the run game and Terry's usage?
Right. Well, first, I don't know if you guys can hear. There's like my neighbor is like got some workers in there and they're banging on the wall right behind me here. So apologies.
No, actually, I couldn't hear it. So,
well, unfortunately, I can. Yeah, I think it's kind of a little bit of the reverse. Wentz tends to hold the ball in the pocket more because he wants to look and see the guy open. But Dotson was the one guy that was out there with him throughout. We know Terry wasn't there back in OTAs because of the contract situation, and Curtis Samuel at the start of training camp was in and out a bit just because they were trying to nurse him through things. And Dotson, he took to the whole situation like a duck to water. He was really effective and crisp with his routes, and Wentz really did seem to have a good connection with him. Whereas with Heinecke is throwing like within the system. He is a little bit better about kind of knowing where to go, but I guess he just didn't work with Dotson a ton. And then, when Heinecke came in, Dotson was out. And I do think it's probably mostly about the run, that they just are running it more. So, that they're now like top 2 or 3 in this stretch of rush attempts per game. So that really does change how often you're throwing in general. Plus, I mean, getting Terry McLaurin the ball makes a lot of sense. And obviously Heinecke is well aware of where the ball needs to go. So it's just an odd combination. I wrote a story today about Dotson and how he's trying to, kind of get out of this, find his stride again. And there's also a little bit in there about him gaining perspective by being more in the community and talking to people who are going through some medical things. But the part of it is also that, Heinecke is throwing to McLaurin like way more than Wentz was. And it makes logical sense. But between that and the rush attempts going up, it right now, Dotson's been kind of the guy who's been squeezed out a bit. It's still crazy that he still leads the team with 4 touchdown catches.
He does. I had seen that earlier today, which is crazy. Armani Rogers, is he done for the year? He was one of those guys I really thought was coming on, and I was excited about him. And then he gets injured, but I hadn't seen whether he was done for the year or
not. He's on IR. I don't know definitively that we think he's out for the year, but obviously we're getting late enough into the year that you can start to wonder about that for sure. I mean, it is weird. It doesn't. I guess time flies that they only have 5 games left.
I know.
Right in the regular season, at least. So I mean, there's not a ton of time to go. I mean, I'll be curious to see where Rogers is next year because, from an athlete standpoint, I thought he was pretty good at times. They didn't seem to use him as much as I would have thought. On the other hand, the dude was playing quarterback a year ago. So the fact that he even made the team was notable, and the fact that he was useful at all, which he wasn't, spot moments here and there, is helpful. I think, to look ahead a smidge, Logan Thomas is one of those guys who they're going to have to make some decisions on in the offseason, but a lot would probably do with A, do they bring in a veteran, or B, do they think Cole Turner and Armani Rogers can do more? I don't know that we'll have that answer, that they'll feel confident enough in that, but I do think Rogers showed some things this year that made that, I think that were intriguing.
It's funny. I compare Gibson to Morgan Moses a lot in this aspect. It feels like Gibby's hurt a lot, but he always posts. Like, I think I saw he's only missed 3 games in his career, even though the turf toe. What is it? It's a foot injury, I think. Sounds like it won't cost him playing time on Sunday. What is it with Gibson?
Yeah, foot injury. He kind of, didn't make a big deal about it yesterday when we talked to him, but he was out there today at the start of practice. We only see the first, 10 or 15 minutes. He was out there with the running backs, catching some passes, running around. So he looked okay. He's questionable in the injury report. So, you never know. But, you mentioned the injury thing. It's what in my mind for several weeks now, the 2 things I've had in my head with Gibson that are very much knock on wood, and I didn't really even want to discuss. 1, staying healthy, and 2, you haven't been fumbling the ball. So
I thought about it the last game. I was like, well, this guy had fumbled in a while.
Yeah. So he has been good. I mean, I think, I know every time he makes some good plays, he's been effective in his role. I think people want to be like, hey, give him the ball more and all. Independent of what Brian Robinson did this last game, obviously he did well. I think with Gibson, it's more or less is more, and I think we're seeing that between the wear and tear, the fumbling, and using him in an effective way. He can make some big plays, but he's also not the best when it comes to avoiding 2nd and 12 the way Robinson is. And I think they've found a good mix with the 2 of them. But maybe we get a little bit less of Gibson. But I guess right now, if I had to project, I would say he plays. But perhaps they dial him back a little bit.
Yeah, I think Jamal Williams had like 4 carries for 21 or something like that. No, there's not a big sample size. He looked healthy, and so maybe if they get him up to even 8 carries, because I'm with you. It feels like Gibson's at his best when he's being used less.
Yeah, I like Jonathan Williams. I think, I try not questioning the game plan or things like that too much because they know more than I do. But I thought it was a little bit of a mistake that they didn't use Jonathan Williams more earlier in the year in the role that Robinson was having. I'm not saying give him 15 carries, but give him more, continue to have a presence inside. I know Ron Rivera this week has talked about that they always planned on having sort of this run first scenario, but then Robinson's situation happened. I mean, I don't know if I really buy that, but I do believe that they wanted to be sort of more of a interior, have a more interior running presence, stay on the clock, power running, what have you. And that, sure, Robinson was the lead there, but Williams was a guy that can do those things. And I felt like maybe they could have used him more, but whatever. If need be, he can play. He's got some speed as well. So yeah, I wouldn't have any issue if he's out there.
And to your point, and I know this is kind of coach speak, but I think it was maybe the week after Robinson gets shot that Rivera's like, we see a lot of the same kind of characteristics with the 2, which led me to think that he was going to get more carries, and it really wasn't. It was mostly Gibson and McKissic at that point. What's the deal with McKissic, by the way? I mean, I know he's out for the year. That went really weird this year, right? Between the whole Buffalo thing and then coming back to Washington, and then his usage. I mean, the usage was way down anyway. Really weird year for McKissic. And you can see in Buffalo what they were going to do with them, because basically it's the James Cook role now.
Yeah, I mean, they, he supposedly was going to see a specialist. I honestly don't think we asked about him this week. He's on IR. So I don't know. I mean, in my head, I'm kind of not anticipating him coming back 2 years in a row with a neck injury. Obviously, that's some serious or potentially some serious things. I don't know how bad it is. When there's time to do the full off-season dive as to what happened this year, for me, I never understood why they kept McKissic. I understood why they kept him from a locker room perspective. He's very popular in there. I think there was a bit of a revolt when he was leaving. But I think that to some degree they weren't wrong in moving on, in part because, again, I do think they always wanted to get a power back like Robinson, and you were going to have Gibson's. That's 2. And I get it that Curtis Samuel last year was a guy you couldn't count on, but they kept saying that he would be. They obviously been, he's obviously been healthy this year, and he does a lot of the same things that McKissic does. I mean, he's effective running the ball. So it's just a bit of an overlap that just felt like unnecessary. And if everybody's healthy, including McKissic, I still don't think he'd be playing much right now. So, again, he's a good player and he's a popular guy, but it didn't seem to make a ton of sense if you knew you were going to go add another running back, but whatever. And hopefully he's able to play, resume his career this year or beyond. And, we'll see what happens.
Let's wrap up what ended up being a long injury segment with everybody's favorite topic, Chase Young. It feels like there's no reason to play him this week. Maybe 10, obvious pass rushing downs. What do you think is likely, and what do you think the plan is?
My take for a bit has been he doesn't play till after the bye week. Right. Now, there was a moment Rivera or whoever speaks is often trying to give us some sort of he's coming along. Even today he said he had a good day of practice. We'll see on Sunday. I don't know. I mean, I guess to me, when you factor in, they don't seem to be completely confident that he is completely confident on the knee. Therefore, and then you're going up to New Jersey to play on that turf that's like, patient zero for this whole turf versus grass debate that's going on in the league. And you factor into the defense is playing really well. I just don't see the need to rush him. Now, maybe the doctor, maybe Chase and everybody says, hey, no, he's really good. He's confident. He's playing well. Let's use him on 10 to 12 snaps. Okay. But if I had to bet, I would say we don't see him until after the bye.
Do you think that, it's funny, I talked to Chris Long was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and that this whole debate about turf came up, and he said in free agency he crossed off all teams that played not on natural grass. Do you think we get to the point where why doesn't the league get a sponsorship and make everybody play on the same exact surface and play on grass if it's deemed to be a big difference in health? And I've talked to a bunch of players that say there's a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, obviously different climates have different needs. You can't maybe use, you maybe don't want to use the same turf in Arizona that you would in New England. But in general, I as best I can tell, it seems like it just comes down to money. Right. To keep obviously the care for grass, you got to do like you do in your backyard. You gotta water it, nurture it, and all that.
And I'm sure you have to put like a heating system underneath for the cold climate, but still.
Sure.
I mean, here are these, you're spending millions upon millions upon millions of dollars on players. It would feel like chipping $5 million extra bucks in the field. I mean, it's not my money, but feels like it'd be a no-brainer.
100%. I'll tell you, obviously, not playing out there, but they have, for anybody who's been out to the facility for, to watch a practice or some event or maybe just seen video at some point. There's a artificial turf field that they don't use. I guess they used it 100 years ago, but it just exists. And, they use the space for putting out tents or when people come out there, the hot fans come out there or whatever. Right. But there has been a couple of times where they've had during the training camp or OTAs, they will put the press conference setup on the turf. And I can tell you that there was a day we did this last year. I was miserable after a while, and I wasn't doing anything. I was just standing there. It was really hot, and it was just if it's 90 degrees, that adds other 10, 15, whatever degrees to it. It doesn't feel great just even standing there, let alone getting hit. So I can imagine it's not fun. So yeah, hopefully that would be ideal. Yeah, I'm with you. Of all the debates, this one doesn't seem to be that complicated. Right. It's better for the players, which is the product. So why would you not want to do it? It's not like it's billions of dollars. It's whatever. So yeah, I'm with you. It seems to me a relative no-brainer, but obviously it's been there for a while. We'll see what happens.
The Snyder selling the team thing was super hot for a week. It has died. I mean, I don't know that it's died, but out in the people talking about it verse. Where do you see that heading? You think they'll have something done by March? I guess the March is what I was told is the soonest it probably can happen. Think that gets done?
Yeah, similar to before when I mentioned the stuff with Gibson, where it was sort of a, knock on wood before I say things out loud. I kind of feel that with all the Snyder stuff, like it's been quiet.
Yeah.
Like, let's not rock the boat. Let's leave. You know, I'm not saying don't release any of these reports. I'm just saying maybe don't do it until the season's over or whatever. And sort of the same thing here. Like, I'm happy that we're in a quiet spell. Not in terms of what I want to have. It's just it's fun to just focus on football and not have to deal with these other things. You know, my I guess basic sense is that, you know, selling it. You mentioned the March at the by the next owners meeting. That seems like a reasonable time frame. And, you know, anecdotally, the best thing that I can point to is, you know, every time there's a report or there's something out in the air about something that Dan Snyder did or whatever, something in a negative light, he and his PR staff are always quickly out there with some sort of statement, you know, denying it, crapping on whoever the other party is, whatever. None of that is happening in the context of people thinking he's going to sell. I mean, I know that they said they're going to check out their options, but the fact that the speculation pretty much quickly went to that means he's going to sell rather than just take on a minority partner, I think says a lot about what's going on. If he really didn't believe that that was going to happen, I think they would have said something by now that people are, you know, misrepresenting the situation. Ironically, of course, the one wonder now is what happens if this winning keeps happening? What if they have a good run? I mean, does that change any of the equation? Maybe it doesn't. If part of the reason why he's finally willing to sell would be whatever the NFL or other legal aspects or he's aware of, or you know. But in terms of the football, this is, you know, obviously, you know, we know this has not been a winning situation in a long time, and you know, even typically in the years past when they've had some wins, like it's, you know, you kind of limp into the playoffs. It feels like right now, even with questions at quarterback, the NFC is pretty weak. I think these guys would have a shot if they can keep this going. So yeah, what does that do for his thinking? That to me is a wonder.
And to your point, the defense and special teams have been playing like really good playoff style football the last couple of weeks. It's enough to hang your hat on, to your point, without really having to worry much about what the quarterback does at all. And that kind of leads me to my next question. They've been really good, like between the 20s, right? But they are still averaging like 18 points a game. Scott Turner drives me a little nutty because I like to root for him, and I think I get what he's trying to do on offense, but proof's in the pudding, as they say, and the scoring, just 17 points in the modern NFL. I get the defense is great, but it's tough to win like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's as hard for me to put this on Scott Turner. I mean, I think the one thing that was exciting about Carson Wentz initially was, okay, he's got the prototype size, he's got the big arm. When Carson Wentz throws some deep balls, they look as pretty as anything that's out there. And thus it was like, okay, can Scott Turner, we'll get a better chance to see Scott Turner, what he really can do and call with this type of quarterback. But obviously, whatever, Wentz had some moments, but there were also a lot of, you know, not so good things. Then he gets hurt. Heinecke comes back in. Heinecke knows Turner's system inside and out, but he's just limited to what they can do. And, you know, part of again, to the point of Rivera saying they wanted to be a run first team. If Wentz was playing and Wentz was playing at a decent level, I really don't see them running the ball 35 times a game. But when you have Heinecke and you want to, you know, limit his exposure, keep him, you know, not have the game lean on him, you're going to run more, you're going to milk the clock, and all those things are, you know, factors. So, yeah, I mean, it's not, if they're going to win games this year at this pace, it's going to be, they're going to, you know, if the opponent scores, you know, 20, 23 points, they're going to probably be in trouble more often than not. So they got to grind it out, keep the other team on the field, off the field, keep their defense fresh, and just hopefully avoid mistakes. And, you know, that formula has been working lately. Is it enough when you're going up against better teams in the playoffs? I mean, that's obviously, you know, a huge question.
I was going to ask you, do you think this has been the turnaround? Has it been more about Heineke's ability to kind of move around the pocket? Is it Carson Wentz's lack of really understanding how the playbook works? Is it you know, are we running the ball better? You know, what is it between the two guys? You think it's more about Heinecke or more about the fact that they've had more stability at offensive line and the defense? You know, a lot of people forget the defense wasn't good the first 3 or 4 games at all.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I pay attention to Twitter, whatever, but like, you know, I'm not diving into necessarily all the Twitter conversations that I imagine, you're in or you see or whatever. So, the constant debate of, well, Heinecke is this and Wentz is that, it's not completely apples to oranges because of things like Brian Robinson wasn't there the first 4 weeks. And then he didn't get the first game that he had double-digit carries was the Bears game when Wentz got hurt. So really Wentz didn't have the full benefit of having Robinson there. You mentioned the offensive line. Trey Turner got benched early on because he wasn't playing well. He was better of late. The line has been better of late. That's a thing for sure. And yeah, the defense has definitely been playing a lot better, but I think they're playing in better. They talk about complementary football all the time. I think what Heinecke is doing, the way they're running the offense with Heinecke, that more ball control thing, I think that helps the defense more because they're able to stay off the field longer, etc. Whereas with Wentz, it was a lot more, this is again back to my Matt Paris comparison with the jokes, but like more boom or bust. Like he'll have some really, great throws, but then often, they're just not moving the chains. And if you look at the various numbers, they're definitely way up there in avoiding 3 and outs compared to where they were before. So, it's not that it's not Heinecke. It's just that I think having Brian Robinson, like let's just say if it was Heinecke there, but it was Antonio Gibson or they didn't have the Robinson type player, I don't know that they would be able to do what they're doing. But having Robinson combined with the other pieces, I think is making a huge difference. One thing I'm wondering, because again, you've got, you're talking to the fans out there more than me probably. When this whole streak started, I heard a lot of people, Heinecke, wow, they should never have gotten Wentz. Heineke's playing great. He's the guy. This is great. Now, when I'm looking at my comments on my story or on Twitter, I'm seeing a lot of, yeah, I know they're winning, but they're limited because Heinecke can't do certain things. And it feels like that faction is now the louder one. Not to say that people are clamoring for Wentz, but it does feel like people are starting to recognize Heineke's helpful, all that for sure, but like it's limited, which is, I think, was the point originally why they went to get Wentz. But do you think there is a tide turning with the fan base on that front, or I
definitely see a lot more of that. The Heinecke hive's been alive and well for years, but it definitely feels like even amongst that group, there's an understanding that he's got a lot of weapons around him, and they're playing really good complementary football. And I think the fans feel like Heinecke ought to get credit for some of the offensive line play being better, just because he's able to elude a little better, I think, than what Wentz did. But yeah, I mean, it's like my second favorite team, the Bulldogs. Are they winning because Stetson Bennett is excellent? Well, no. I mean, he's not even in the Heisman running, right? So, but the team is great. I think that's where the fans kind of are with Heinecke is like. But I'd say this: I would be stunned if Heinecke isn't the starting quarterback next year. Would you be? Other than going to get Garoppolo again, what are their options? Because I don't see anybody. People will say, "Well, trade up for quarterback." Well, why would Houston not take the best quarterback available? Why wouldn't Charlotte not be looking for a quarterback, and why would they trade it to you? So I find it hard to believe that they're going to do something different at quarterback next year.
Yeah, I don't know that I would be surprised if it wasn't Heinecke, but I do think so. At the NFL, there's always evolutions, it's always cyclical, things like that. Teams are running the ball a lot more now, which is something that I've been talking about for a couple of years. So like everybody wants to have these dynamic passing attacks, but there's never enough quarterbacks ever on planet Earth to be able to do that. Yeah. So instead of trying, like I used to get into this with my Wizards friend back in the day when the Wizards had like Nene and Gortat and John Wall, but they wanted them to shoot more threes because that's what was happening. I'm like, you don't have the personnel. Do what you do. So to that end, do they think that, okay, we think there's a formula here. If you keep Deron Payne, Chase Young comes back, you have Brian Robinson now healthy from the start. Maybe you draft some offensive linemen. Is that enough? Like maybe if in this era, like, hey, we think we have a good formula. Heinecke knows the system. They would probably have to, at a minimum, draft a quarterback high, I would guess. But yeah, I think that part is conceivable. I just think ultimately, though, do you really want to go into a season where you're saying this is the plan? I just don't know if I buy that aspect of it. But look, I mean, if they keep this up, I mean, how do you got to at least consider it because something is working.
It's funny that you mentioned the cyclical nature because it's definitely what we are doing right now. And I know other teams are, what happens when everybody wants to pass the ball and you put more and more safeties on the field. Well, that's fine. We'll run at that. We'll run at that all day long. And so, because we don't have the same kind of linebackers that we used to have, the linebacker position is all but, who has more than two linebackers on the field more than 25, 35% of the time, which means there's an opportunity to take advantage of the system, which, as you know, coaches are always looking for.
Yeah, I think there's only three teams. I think it's only Buffalo and Dallas who use standard 4 defensive backs less than Washington. They always have 5 or more on the field. And, I think this is where the Daron Payne thing comes into play. I wrote a story this week about Payne's situation, both him specifically, but also the defensive tackle market and how the defensive tackle market might be the way receivers were last year, where you kind of knew they would get paid, but maybe not to the degree that they will because there's a lot of guys out there. And the thing that's interesting about Payne and Allen together is that when you have that, it makes going with 5 and 6 defensive backs a lot easier because those guys are beating the blockers. They're getting the work done instead of having to send blitzers. Thus, you can keep more guys back, or they're taking. They're keeping the linemen off of the safeties, like Landon Collins last year kept saying he didn't really like playing up front, which I get it. He's not the biggest guy. Yeah. So that's the sort of the argument, I think, for keeping both, even though that's not typically how teams would want to build, paying two guys inside that much money. But that is the advantage if you want to play.
It's the cheat code. I mean, all defensive coordinators would tell you they would much rather be able to, play 4 and drop everybody else. And to your point, well, I was going to ask you this later, so let's just do it now. I figure they'll do their best. I believe Ron when he says they want to keep Payne around before the season started. I know you and I have had this conversation before where it was like, there's just no way. I don't see how that's possible. I wouldn't do it. I think I've totally come around on this thing and would pay Payne. I guess the tag number for defensive linemen is around 19 and a half. So, I mean, you pretty much gave, 18 and a half to Allen 2 years ago. So, I mean, that if you get to 20, I don't know. And that's one of the nice things about having Heinecke, right, is that his contract is low. Even if you had to give him something more next year, even at $10 million a year, which is a steal at quarterback, it allows you, right, to pay Payne. The one thing I'll ask you, which I thought was interesting, and JP Finley brought this up, was who's paying the contract? So, I mean, how much is Dan wanting to do if he's in the middle of selling the team? And I guess that leads me to another question, like, does Dan come straight out of his pocket to pay Daron Payne, or does he use Commanders' resources? I'm not sure how that worked. I mean, I'm assuming it just goes on to the next owner.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different topics in there. I mean, sure, in terms of the owner thing, absolutely, it's a question. If we're saying March is when, we may have maybe something gets done by, well, free agency is going to start around that time or before that, or at the minute, like they don't have to wait. They can sign Payne today if they want, but they've got to make, the planning has got to go into that. And if you're going to spend, that kind of money, and you got to figure out what you want to do at quarterback, somebody has to make some determination. So presumably Snyder may have that early on. But in terms of, what to do, I mean, I think the projection on the tag is a little under 19 for the moment. And then what my story had, though, is like, if you look at the defensive tackle market, Aaron Donald is the highest paid defensive player, I think, in the league at like 31 million annual average salary. But the next defensive tackle is 21 million.
Right.
And the belief is that when you look at the guys who are coming out this year, either as free agents like Payne, or guys who are like they're going into the last year of their rookie deal, like Dexter Lawrence with the Giants, who we'll see this weekend, or guys like Chris Jones in Kansas City, who are going into the last year of their deal, there's going to be a lot of guys who will be positioned to say, hey, I'd like to get paid. And because of that, the thinking is that gap between the 31 to 21 million is where the agents are going to aim for. And if they're successful, and people I spoke to think they will be, at least, for some of them, then Payne's number could easily exceed the 20 or 21 million. And I think that was sort of the point of my story. We'll see what happens, but the idea that he's just going to get the Jonathan Allen contract may not be the deal. And then Washington has to make a decision. But I also think the real variable here is Chase Young, because it's never been, as far as I know, a matter of them not negotiating with Payne because they didn't like Payne. It's because you have Montez Sweat and Chase Young coming behind them. Teams typically would rather pay defensive ends and tackles. And how do you pay all four of these guys, especially if you have a Carson Wentz or somebody making that kind of money at quarterback? Well, now Wentz is probably out. We don't know what they're going to do with that quarterback. But what about Chase Young? I don't know. I mean, he obviously hasn't even played yet. So if you let Payne go, you're really saying we're going to extend Chase Young at some point. I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying, how do you know? And that's where I wonder, if keeping Payne all of a sudden makes more sense, along with the reasons like it's the strength of the team and things like that. So I think this Chase Young thing is really important down the stretch for them to have a feel for what he is, because I think that's going to really influence what they think happens with Payne, along with where that defensive tackle market goes.
Well, and no disrespect to Fedarian Mathis, but he ain't Daron Payne either. You know what I mean? Like,
right. They drafted him in the second round. I mean, yes, they also let Heinecke go, but Settle go. But like, you don't spend a second round pick on a defensive tackle when you have those other two guys if you're keeping them. So they did this presumably with the idea that Payne is probably gone, or he could be, which isn't to say they can't keep him. I'm just saying that, like, that's why, there's a lot of evidence to suggest they understood where this was probably going. But now the season is played out, and it's not a hypothetical. He's been really good. It's been the strength of the team, and Chase Young hasn't played yet. So, what do you do?
I guess they could franchise tag him worst to worst, but you basically, as we've seen before, saying we know this ain't going to happen long term. So, because not very often do you get long term done after the tag, but feels like tag could be reasonable. They don't have anybody else to tag, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible if the tag is in that 18 to 19 million range and you move on from Wentz. Wentz's salary next year is 20 million. So it's kind of a swap. But then, okay, but like you said, now you still haven't locked up Payne long term. We know how the franchise tag thing goes in these around here, at least. And then what are you doing at quarterback? You're kind of, to some degree, boxing yourself into the Heinecke rookie route, which I'm not saying is the worst case scenario, but it's that as opposed to something grander. So yeah, I mean, I like this. I like pondering these things, the roster stuff, like, to me, that's a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where this whole thing goes, and do they buck the trend of keeping, paying two defensive tackles a ton of money, or do they decide, hey, well, yeah, of course we will. That's the strength of our team. Why are we going to break that up? So it'll be interesting.
Kerrigan in, Sam Mills out. I mean, is it really that simple as to why the defensive line became so much more effective?
Well, I mean, Jeff Scanina, took over from Mills, and Kerrigan then came in to effectively replace Scanina. I don't know if it's just that, but I don't think it's not that. I think that, there had been rumblings for a long time that the defensive line really just didn't seem to jive with Sam Mills for whatever the reason. And Scanina, former player, just completely, he's just a total, like, I'm all about the football, kind of alpha kind of guy. I think there is something to that he's gotten a lot out of these guys, that there may be more of a connection there with him than there was before. And I do think it's been something of a factor. I mean, they obviously, all these guys had talent before. But, look, I also think that, again, last year when Rivera was talking a lot about the lack of maturity and discipline on the field, I think Chase Young was sort of the main guy for that. Well, he hasn't played. They've been more disciplined. We don't hear Rivera talking about those things. And so, I think there's a lot of different combinations. But, yeah, I do think that coaching change there played some kind of factor for sure.
Before we get to the keys to the game here, I'm curious. I have never seen this right tackle rotation thing before. It's been a thing for like 3 weeks. Have they said anything about it? Because I've never seen a game plan where it's like, well, we're going to rotate the tackles?
Yeah, well, no worries about that because Cosme's going to play right guard this week. You know, it is an unusual circumstance. If I had to sort of read between the lines, my best guess was I've been talking for a while about Sam Cosme playing guard. Ultimately, anyway, I'm not the only one, but I've been sort of talking about it a lot. In fact, it was discussed today with Rivera that somebody joked that they officially moved Cosme to guard, so I'd stop asking questions about it. So I think that playing Cosme got him game reps, got him back on the field. And yeah, it's unusual, but I think they were anticipating whether injury or just at some point we got to get our best 5 out there doing this. So, the fact that Turner is out this week with an ankle or knee issue in combination, this is why, to me, it made sense getting your best 5 guys on the field, considering the line's not been that great. Now we'll see. Cosme is going to have an interesting matchup. The Giants have 2 really good defensive tackles, and he hasn't done it before at this level. So we'll see if he can handle it. But I think short term it makes the most sense, and long term it might ultimately be where he ends up, leading to the question of, is Lucas the starter next year, or do they go out and spend a first or second round pick or something to get a tackle?
What do you think the game ends up looking like on Sunday? What is what is the key to victory, and what do you think the score looks like?
Definitely nobody's picking a high score. I don't know what the over under is, but if you're picking over, it's got to be a pretty low
41, I think.
All right. I don't know if it'll be exactly like last week, but I think both of these teams is going to be, we're going to want to keep it on the ground. And, Daniel Jones, he's got some of the same skills that Mariota had last week. And, Atlanta had over 160 yards on the ground. One difference is that they've been Saquon Barkley, after a really good start, has not been the same back. I think teams are keying on him and he's maybe getting worn down a little bit. So I really think it kind of comes down to that. Look, Daniel Jones has been like, an all-star or all-pro when he's played Washington in the past. So, we'll see if he's got that confidence or they can figure out a way to slow him down. If not, they could be in some trouble. But, just don't make mistakes. I say don't make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Don't make turnovers. Avoid, huge gaffes, whatever that means. And, the Giants are pretty limited in sort of their playmaking on both sides of the ball. So, I think if Washington plays a sound game, they should be able to get a win, but it's not going to be some, cakewalk. I wouldn't think. The Giants are well coached. They've got a formula. So, I don't know. To me, it's something along the lines of, 2017. I guess I'll say Washington, but I'm slightly hesitant because I feel like everybody's kind of picking them. And I don't know if I think they're good enough for everybody to be picking them, but they obviously have been playing well lately.
For those that don't know, you pay close attention to the Wizards. I wonder if you just give me a couple of minutes before we get out of here on what you think about this team, and do you think there's a big trade left for them to make?
Well, I think they're kind of my thought going into the year was, if everything breaks their way, particularly with health of Beal and Porzingis, they could be a 6 seed. I just don't see much more upside than that. That said, Porzingis has played really well, and if he's, able to play as an all-star level player throughout the year, that could change some of the calculus. His issue has just been injuries over and over again. I think they still need to get some more out of the point guard spot. Monty Morris has been kind of bit underwhelming, and DeLon Wright's obviously hurt. But, again, Porzingis has been good. Kuzma's clutch. I think Beal's been a lot more efficient, except in sort of maybe in the last minute of games where he's still kind of fumbling the ball a bit too much. So I think they've been fine. I haven't been blown away one way or the other.
Is this the best big 3 they've had since Gilbert?
I don't know. Peak John Wall with Bradley Beal and I don't know, pick your third guy.
And the Polish hammer.
Right. I probably would go that direction just because you had, Wall was certainly that, during that one stretch was, an all-star kind of level player. But, Porzingis is really good. It would be easier to be a little bit more excited for me if, Denny or Rui or Kispert went up another level. They all have moments for sure, but like get to that next step. And don't get me started on Johnny Davis. That thing is crazy. I'm not saying it's done or he's a bust, but the fact that you can't even get on the court when they've had injuries in the backcourt, it's like, wow, that's pretty jarring. And then Jordan Goodwin, a guy who was, a guy off the scrap heap who's a two-way player, has played pretty decently. So, I'm kind of where I'm always at with the Wizards. It's fine, but like if the aspirations are contender, I still don't see it, but that's all right. I mean, it's not all right, but like, they're not a disaster. They're doing some good things. Well, hopefully they can stay healthy.
Yeah, I'll get out of here on this. You asked me earlier about where the fans sit with Heinecke. I'm curious what the mood is at the stadium, because I know you're there for the games during this win streak. Can you feel it? Are they getting pumped up in there, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I definitely think the crowd's been pretty good lately. I mean, one of the big things that drives me and the other reporters crazy is when people on Twitter or elsewhere say we just want to, see them lose, or haters, all that kind of crap. Independent of like, none of us have like skin in the game, win or lose, we're just covering. I promise you, and it's the same thing for the fans, I'm sure, I promise you, it's just more fun when they're winning. People are in a better mood. And, from the fans, it's the same thing. It's a lot better to be excited about. Like the game this week, it's not here, obviously, but like this is a big game. I know like they played Philadelphia a few weeks ago. It didn't feel like it was a big game because there was, no expectations Washington was going to win. This one, there's real stakes. If they win, their chances of making a playoff go up dramatically. If they lose, it goes the other way because of where the nature of these two teams are in the standings. This is a real game. This is a big game. That's fun. So I think the fans have reflected the increased importance of some of these games. And, hopefully, in 2 weeks, the Giants will be back. And, if Washington can win this game, they'll really be, in a good spot when the Giants return. And if not, that's going to be a massive game because they lose that one and they're probably screwed. So I think the fans have been better, and hopefully they'll have something to really cheer about next in 2 weeks.
You mentioned standing room only podcast. I know the episode came out the other day. Is there anything, you have another one coming before the show, articles? What should we be looking out for, Ben?
Yeah, I went overboard on the podcast this week. Sometimes the guest just comes. So I'm going to actually, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to crank out another podcast looking ahead to this game. But I had Boomer Esiason on this week. James Smith-Williams, Jay Gruden is on every week with us. So a lot on that front. And then on the written front of The Athletic, like I said, I wrote a really deep dive reported story on Deron Payne and the defensive tackle market, where I think was pretty good. And today a story on Jahan Dotson trying to break out of his funk and also learning how to, basically live on his own for the first time. So so that's the deal. And subscribe to The Athletic if you can, or give it as a gift for the holiday season. Just click on my article. Helps my cause.
And people don't realize this, but you get credit if they subscribe while reading your article.
It does. It helps the cause. Yes. I mean, I'm not getting any money out of it, but just, the bosses see a check mark basically.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Ben, you're the best, man. I appreciate always when you come on and give us a little time.
Doug, I appreciate it. Appreciate the time and the invite. Enjoy the holiday season, and good luck watching these guys on Sunday.
No doubt. Maybe we'll do this again when they make the playoffs.
Playoffs? Well, why don't we just aim for the Super Bowl? I mean, at this point,
That's right. All right, buddy. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Thanks.